Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a brand new episode of the Word of the Day podcast, where useful words are pleasantly explained. My name is Jamie Silva, I'm your host, and I'm joined today in the RAV4 studios by yet another talented voice actor, Priyanka. Priyanka, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Jamie. Glad to be here.
Today's word is the noun Harbinger. And before we get all into what it means and where it comes from and all that other fun stuff, I want to talk a bit about the pronunciation. See, both Priyanka and I, for ages, thought this word was pronounced Harbinger, which would more or less rhyme with linger. This was wrong. Again, it's pronounced Harbinger.
Our mutual mistake likely stems from encountering this word initially in written form, probably in a book. Without hearing it read aloud, we would have just had to guess at the pronunciation.
Which happens all the time, right? I mean, this is why, when people are out in society or whatever, and they mispronounce a word and get corrected, they often sort of shamefacedly say, "Oh, sorry, I guess I've only ever seen that word written. I didn't know that's how you said it." And then everyone chuckles, probably leaving the poor person who said the word wrong feeling silly and embarrassed. And I think this stigma is totally wrong and really a sad thing.
Why is that?
Well, I am a big proponent of mispronouncing words. Because if you're not mispronouncing words, then you're probably not learning new words. Because, again, most of the unfamiliar words people encounter are in written form, particularly in books.
This makes sense on a couple levels. First, there's a far greater variety of words in written text than the spoken word. See, when you're talking, you basically have to pick whatever word first comes to mind. I mean, maybe sometimes you can pause for just a couple seconds to pick the right one, if it's super important to describe or express something just so.
Yeah, but you can't do this too often, or people won't be able to follow you. Too many pauses, it'd just be too confusing. Like in a conversation with someone, you can't be like, "Yeah, so some friends and I visited this local bakery recently, and I ordered these amazing fresh-baked danishes. They were so yummy." Hold on a sec. They weren't just yummy. That's not a very descriptive word. They were, let's see. They were delectable. That's it.
Delectable. Okay, that does sound pretty good. So, as we were saying...
No, actually, delectable, I'm afraid, still doesn't capture just how fancy these danishes were, and how filling. I think the word I want here instead would be... sumptuous. Yes, indeed. These danishes were absolutely sumptuous. You guys should really check this place out. It's... guys? Where'd they all go?
But at this point, all Jamie's friends have wandered away, having tired of waiting for him to find just the right adjective to describe these danishes.
They were also scrumptious. That's a good word.
So you can see why people generally just go with whatever words they first think of, which are probably the simpler, more basic, easier to pronounce words. Writers, on the other hand, typically have way more time to pick just the right word, including if that word is somewhat off the beaten path.
Exactly. Let's say, for example, that a newspaper reporter is documenting the kerfuffle that transpired at the airport yesterday when a local man tried to board his flight together with his nest of comfort hornets. Here, the reporter knows that describing a nest of hornets as angry is a little trite, it's a little cliché, so she needs some synonyms for angry.
Thankfully, she probably has time to pause, lean back in her chair, take a sip of her third cup of coffee that morning, open up a dictionary/thesaurus, and eventually decide that enraged is a little too obvious, apoplectic is too obscure, affronted is probably a touch archaic, incensed is, it just doesn't fit somehow. But the word irate, that will do just fine.
And then, when you, the reader, are reading about this incident in the newspaper later, you would see this word, irate, guess the meaning from the context, but perhaps not be quite sure whether it's pronounced irate, irate, errate, or something else.
And you could look it up, to be sure, but you probably won't. It feels like so much trouble, because you're all engrossed in the article you're reading, and you don't want to interrupt the flow. So you probably just guess how to say it, based on the spelling.
Which sometimes works, but definitely not always. And so you might walk away with the wrong pronunciation in your head. Thus, again, setting yourself up for a rude awakening when you come across someone who knows the real pronunciation.
But this is okay, because, again, it mostly just means that you're reading a lot, which is the single best way to expand your vocabulary. In fact, probably a much better method than listening to this show.
Hey, what are you...
Sorry, but do you disagree?
Well, I mean, no, I don't exactly disagree. Extensive reading really is the best way to pick up new words, depending on what you're reading, of course. But, Priyanka, why'd you have to sound so enthusiastic about it?
No, you're right. My bad. How about this instead? Reading is the best way to expand your vocabulary. In fact, probably a much better method than listening to this show. Is that better?
I guess? But in any case, it's high time we get on with today's word, which is, once again, the noun harbinger. In my view, this means a sign or omen of the future, probably a bad one. The main phrase I've heard harbinger pop up in is harbinger of doom. That said, other similarly dour variations of this phrase are also permissible, like harbinger of trouble, harbinger of bad tidings, harbinger of approaching disaster, that sort of thing. So anyway, if you showed up to a job interview and the guy interviewing before you came out of the room visibly shaking and then shouted, "Run for your lives," before sprinting from the building, you might think to yourself, uh-oh, that looks like a harbinger of doom, for sure.
The implication being that, based on that guy's reaction, this may not be a great place to work.
Or maybe it's just a really tough interview. In either case, you might go in for your interview a little ill at ease.
Now let's check the Google definition of harbinger. This goes, quote, a person or thing that announces or signals the approach of another, unquote.
That's super different from mine. Does Google have another definition, perhaps?
Yeah, one more.
Oh, that's probably the one we want then. Read that, if you would.
Okay, quote, a forerunner of something, as in, these works were not yet opera, but they were the most important harbinger of opera, unquote. Still pretty different from yours, huh?
Yeah, maybe we need to venture beyond the Google definitions.
Sure. I think Merriam-Webster has what you're looking for. Quote, something that foreshadows a future event, or something that gives an anticipatory sign of what is to come, unquote.
Oh, what a relief. Yeah, that's it. I mean, this definition still doesn't include the sense that the foreshadowing is probably a negative one, indicating that something bad is going to happen, but I guess that's more of a connotation of the word, and not part of the literal meaning. Now, Priyanka, what can you tell us about the etymology of harbinger?
The earliest real form of harbinger that we have is a Middle English term from the 12th century, Harbinger, which meant an innkeeper, or someone who offers lodging. By the late 15th century, this word had evolved to Harbinger, meaning a person sent on ahead of a group of travelers in order to arrange lodging for them.
This sounds like the early form of booking a hotel reservation, before, phone and internet and such. Just have a Harbinger get to wherever you're going early and reserve you some rooms. But what if there weren't any vacancies?
I don't think this was as much of a problem as it might seem, Jamie. See, these Harbingers usually went on ahead of armies, or kings and queens, which I imagine gave the innkeeper plenty of incentive to find a few extra rooms.
The more general meaning of forerunner, or something that announces the arrival of another person or thing, didn't pop up until around the 16th century, around which time the verb form, harbinge, meaning to lodge, also made its appearance.
Next, let's talk about usage for harbinger. The Google definitions show that one way to use it is to describe anything that signals something is about to arrive or occur. And whatever is on the way doesn't have to be bad. It could be, but not necessarily. So, sure, traffic could be a harbinger of an accident ahead. But also, the national anthem can be a harbinger of a sporting event about to start. Or a rooster crowing could be said to be a harbinger of the approaching dawn.
Oh, I have one too. April showers are a harbinger of May flowers.
Ah yes, very good. Now, the next sense of harbinger is the most common one, the harbinger of doom sense. This means you can use it in settings where you sense doom approaching and there's a specific thing that gives you that sense.
Yeah, whatever that thing is, it is the harbinger of doom, or of trouble, or bad news, or whatever the case may be. Let's say, for example, that you're making custard, and when you open the fridge, you pick up a whiff of expired milk. That might be a harbinger of doom. It indicates that you probably won't be making any custard today after all, which is a real letdown.
Yeah, nobody wins there. One important detail, though. Once you actually check the carton and confirm for sure that the milk is bad, that's not a harbinger anymore. It's no longer a warning sign, it's the real thing.
Very true. See, harbingers of doom are all about signs, hints, and suggestions that bad outcomes await. Strong hints, maybe, but once you see the doom clearly, or are, heaven forbid, experiencing it, then you don't need a harbinger anymore. Well, it's now time to get some examples of how to use harbinger in ordinary conversation or writing. I'll kick it off with example number 1. Rumors of approaching layoffs already had Marvin on edge, which is why, when he received an email from his boss one afternoon with the subject line, "Quick Chat," he saw it as an unmistakable harbinger of doom.
Example number 2. Though at first it just seemed like she had the sniffles, Jan soon recognized the tickle at the back of her throat as a harbinger of a head cold to come.
Example number 3 comes from the Iliad by Homer. Quote, "And now as dawn rose from her couch, harbinger of light alike to mortals and immortals, Jove sent fierce discord with the banner of war in her hands to the ships of the Achaeans." Unquote.
Example number 4 comes from the book Barchester Towers by Anthony Trollope. Quote, "At the end of 2 months, the bishop and the lady reappeared, and as a happy harbinger of their return, heralded their advent by the promise of an evening party on the largest scale." Unquote.
Well, folks, I think that'll do it for us, and that'll do it for today's Word. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and thank you, Priyanka, for joining me.
Jamie, it's been a pleasure.
Excellent. Well, I hope you all found this program unimaginably informative and superlatively entertaining. And if you want more Word of the Day in your life, might I recommend following the show on Instagram at WOTD Podcast or liking our Facebook page where we post the occasional fun graphic or update. For now, though, this is Jamie Silva, your host, saying so long from the Rav4 Studios. We hope you have a great, and we'll see you next time.